Thanks for joining, everybody. This is Adam Worobec. I am the Business Analytics Practice Director at Tallan. I'm going to be doing a bulk of the presentation, but I'll also be joined a little bit later on by one of my colleagues, Bill Blais, who will wrap us up. We've got three things we want to cover in the webinar. The first two topics I'll cover. We're going to start off by talking and looking at some advanced analytics scenarios and how they can be addressed with the Cortana Analytics Suite from Microsoft. We'll then transition over to Power BI, which is the new cloud-based data visualization, data storytelling service that Microsoft offers. And then Bill's going to take us home by talking about all the new capabilities coming out in SQL Server 2016, specifically focusing on the BI capabilities. So a lot of focus on the advancements in reporting services, as well as the advancements in analysis services and a few other things. So to get us out of the gate here, we're going to talk about analytics. One of the things that we always try to talk to customers about is what more they could be doing with their data, and we get that question from a lot of customers as well. And one of the things that we always challenge them to think about is not approaching that as a truly like, hey, I've got this data and I spent a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of money in getting it perfect, and I want to do other things with it now. But really back away from that and think about more about the business problem, the opportunity to create an innovative experience for your end user. You know, it could be your customer, it could be a partner, it could be another team inside of your own organization. And the way we do that is we think about good design, right? If you've ever heard the saying, good design is invisible, we kind of apply that to analytics as well. If you think about places and products and services like Netflix, like Amazon, like LinkedIn, some of the brand name digital properties that are out there today. I don't know anybody that goes to one of these sites and the first thing that they think of is, wow, what amazing analytics they've got at work here, right? But truly behind the scenes of a Netflix or an Amazon or a LinkedIn, there are some really amazing analytics at work. And so that's really the message we want you guys to take away from this session is when approached with that kind of a challenge, think a little bit beyond just the data and the data science and the potential algorithms. Another example, this is one of our clients, Eland. So Eland is a mortgage bank for consumers, and their innovation that they're bringing to market is to digitize the mortgage. So if anybody's ever applied for a mortgage, you know how much of an arduous process that can be, right? You go and fill out the application, which in and of itself is painful. Then after that, you've got to submit all kinds of documentation, pay stubs, tax returns, who knows what else. And as you're going through that process from the consumer side, there's got to be somebody at the bank, a processor first, and then potentially an underwriter that is sitting there and looking through everything you've submitted, enough to know that, oh, hey, Adam, you forgot to submit the pay stub from 3 weeks ago. We need that from you. Or, hey, you forgot to submit your tax return from 2 years ago. We need that from you. So you can see the cost on either end. And the opportunity here is that obviously if you can digitize this process, for me as a consumer, I'm going to be more I'm going to want to do business with you, right? Because the process is going to be easier for me. And then from the bank's point of view, they've got to hire less people to do that processing work, that potentially underwriting work. And so you're probably thinking to yourself, well, hey, Adam, what's your point? Like, where's the analytics in all this? Well, if we truly do digitize it, right, if you can take, an example of another web property, mint.com. If I can sign into mint.com and I can get, with my username and password, a comprehensive dashboard of every of my whole financial picture, basically every account I have, every investment I own, and et cetera, and all in one place, then we know that the technology exists to aggregate and pull all that information in. So why couldn't we pull in your pay stubs? Why couldn't we pull in your tax returns, right, into a mortgage application? And then once we have all that, then the analytics comes, right? Then we can underwrite your mortgage, perhaps by making a decision through a machine learning algorithm rather than having a person, a human underwriter sitting there and deciding, looks good, or no, doesn't look good, right? Because if you're borrowing a certain amount of money and if you make a certain amount of money, all these ratios are pretty well known. And so it doesn't take, a very complex algorithm even, as long as you've got the data in place. To sort of automate that decision. So that's the opportunity that's out there, and the innovative brands that are bringing these ideas to market are definitely leveraging analytics, but it's not, hey, what else do I do with my data? It's definitely a decision or a set of ideas that's formed by looking at a broader opportunity or problem that needs to be solved. So just to kind of put it in simple terms, something you can take away from this webinar, we often talk about these 6 building blocks, and you can see number 6 down at the bottom is the data and analytics, right? We are going to drive everything off of that, but it's not the first thing that we start with. The first thing that we start with is what is that opportunity, what is the strategy or the innovation around that we can bring to market. And one of the ways to derive at that is to what we like to call walking a mile in your customer's shoes. And your customer doesn't have to be, I mean, a lot of times it is your end customer, but it could be any customer, any end user of the solution that you're proposing. It could be a business partner. It could be, like we said, another team inside of your own organization. And then you've got a whole bunch of non-technical things, automating processes. This can be solutions where you're leveraging a service bus to broker, data coming from wherever, your data warehouse, your data lake, as well as some operational systems and surfacing that through a mobile or a tablet-based application. You may have organizational changes, like the way your teams are structured in supporting that. You may look at your own IT organization and decide that you like the idea of a 2-speed IT. You've got the slower speed, which is the keep the lights on team, the guys that are fixing bugs, the guys that are making maybe slight enhancements, they're supporting the application, making sure it keeps running. And then there's the high-speed part that's doing all the innovative version 1.0 type development. And that's a lot of times where we get called in is to develop those innovative version 1.0 solutions for clients and then hand it over to the support teams to enhance further and iterate on and ultimately support. And then finally, there's the data and analytics, all of that work that we put in over the years, doing our BI implementations, building out our reports and dashboards. Obviously we've spent that money and there's a good value to that data that we can now further. But again, like we keep saying, it's not about starting with the data. So how does all this come together? How do you actually, build one of these solutions? Well, I put this slide up because I think everybody can recognize the guy in the middle there. That's IBM's Watson, and IBM, credit to them for making a brilliant marketing move by developing a machine, server basically, that had these, machine learning algorithms on it that could, essentially beat out a human, the reigning human champion on Jeopardy. And by doing so, obviously get a lot of positive press about the future of cognitive computing and artificial intelligence, et cetera. Well, I bring this up because obviously IBM's Watson is fairly well known. However, not very many people know that Microsoft has equivalent technology, because when you get into Watson and you actually start to take advantage of it, all you're dealing with is either a set of APIs that are available in the cloud for you to connect to and take advantage of in your own applications, or that fridge-sized appliance that you can deploy into your own data center. But underneath the covers, Microsoft has a similar offering. It's just not as well marketed yet, but with the Cortana Analytics Suite, you have the same set of capabilities. You've got, on the left-hand side here, data generated by your business applications, your custom applications, the sensors and devices, all of that that's happening within your organization that you've already, perhaps even your data warehouse, like we said earlier, you've already put time into developing and maturing. And then on the other end, you have the opportunity to enable, really, at a highest level, one of two things: either people to make better decisions, more informed decisions. And I don't mean the, hey, pull up a dashboard and look at a report and make a decision about today, but really the high dollar, low volume type of, mission critical decision, the one that this business person is deciding, say, in a loan scenario, maybe a more complex loan scenario, there is the value to an algorithm, suggesting what might be the probable or most appropriate cause of action. Then there's the other track, which is automation. Automation is arguably for the higher volume low-dollar transactions, the ones that would take a team of people or maybe even be cost prohibitive to deliver with just people, and you can now take that and automate it. So in our mortgage scenario, the possibility of automating the underwriting, right? Because in a dual income household with the applicants both having worked at the same job for 10 years and applying for a loan well within their means, it's kind of a no-brainer. You don't really need a person to verify that that's a good risk, a risk that the bank ought to take. And so all of this is capability inside of that black box. But to not make it a black box, let's dig into it a little bit deeper. So within the Cortana Analytics Suite, you've got a host of Azure-based services, and Azure is the brand name for the Microsoft Cloud. And being able to take data coming in from anywhere, and in the first column there on the left, the information management column, being able to source it. So with the data factory, you've got basically a cloud-based ETL tool that you can use to source data from an on-premise system, from another cloud service that you're perhaps subscribed to. With the Azure Data Catalog right below that, you've got the ability to, like the name says, catalog all of your data assets. So they could be coming obviously from different places. They could all be in your data warehouse. But this is the both technical and business metadata that you can attribute to the data assets that you have, so that they are now more findable. They are better documented. And so somebody coming into your organization new, or somebody joining a team or shifting from one team to another that wants to dive into a more analytical role, doesn't necessarily have to get that information by word of mouth or from the water cooler. They go to the data catalog and they're able to search. And the beauty about it is it's very crowdsourced. In the sense that as I start to use a data source, I could tag it differently. I could describe it better. And so as more and more people use the data catalog, the better the data catalog becomes. And then the last information management service down at the bottom is the Azure Event Hub. This is really designed for streaming data. So data from sensors. We're going to talk in a little bit about a water company scenario where you've got data streaming in from sensors that are on the water meters. You could do this with streaming Twitter feeds if you want to study or pay attention to perhaps how people are talking about your company or your brands on social media, and respond to those. See if there's a spike in either positive or negative sentiment. Those are the kinds of things you could do with the Azure Hub, Azure Event Hub. Once the data's coming in, we've got to have a place to store it, obviously. So the Azure Data Lake is essentially the Azure implementation or Azure service that enables you to build data lakes. So data lakes are kind of an evolution, for those that don't know, of a data warehouse. The challenge historically with data warehouses, still valuable. I'm not saying, oh, now there's a new thing and nobody builds data warehouses anymore. But with data warehouses, you historically have had to know the questions you want to ask, and then you spend the time to create the data models, and then you spend the time to load the data into the data models, and hence you have a data warehouse. And that limits, you from, in terms of the questions you're able to ask it, because you had to know those, a lot of those up front. But then later on, when you have new questions you want to ask and they weren't accounted for in the model of the data warehouse, you have to start that life cycle all over again, and that becomes a fairly expensive process, especially when you're supporting analytics and data science, where you've got professionals that are sitting there iterating through data day in and day out. You're not really going to be able to guess the questions they're going to want to ask. A lot of times you don't know. It's one question leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And so the data lake is kind of the reverse of the data warehouse. You just store it first, store it in its raw format. Storage is cheap. Let's put it in there and then catalog it so we know what we've got. But when the analysts need the data, then we'll worry about creating the models or they can actually, with the tools that they have, create their own models and pull together the pieces that maybe before they wouldn't even been able to pull together. A scenario of this, we built a data warehouse years ago for a retailer, and it was your traditional retail information, what's happening at the stores, what's happening online, and in their case, a catalog business. But that served operations very well in terms of retail numbers and store and e-commerce channel productivity. However, when the marketers needed to do their analysis, they were more concerned about the customer, and the data warehouse really wasn't centered around the customer. It was centered around the operations of the retailer. And so, that life cycle would have to start all over again. And back then it was so cost prohibitive, you had to kind of say to marketing, sorry, no, or no, that's coming in a future release. Well, today that's sort of reversed. Marketing could build, the analysis that they need for a marketing campaign, which is going to launch in February, and we need it now. And after, February is done, that marketing campaign will be over, and it's sort of throwaway, and it's a shame to have to build all that into a data warehouse. Actually, it just doesn't make any sense at all. And so these are the kind of scenarios that these two approaches offer, and on the Azure platform you can take either one or both. Once you've got that data, you got it in a good place, you're starting to enable the analytics to begin. So you've got your data science team using things like Azure Machine Learning, which enables them to take data, build a data set, scrub it, clean it, and then ultimately apply R-based or Python-based algorithms to it. So machine learning is about doing some prescriptive analytics first, understanding what's in the data and kind of learning more about it's customer information, like we were talking about the marketing scenario a second ago. So understanding more about those customers, all the way to predictive analytics to be able to perhaps, predict what might happen in certain scenarios. Who do we target for this particular campaign? Who's likely to respond, and that kind of thing. If the data sets are large, especially if they're unstructured, then Azure HD Insight is essentially an implementation of Hadoop. It's Hortonworks Hadoop, so Microsoft didn't go out and create their own Hadoop implementation. They partnered with Hortonworks, and together they created a version of Hadoop that runs on Windows Server, brought it to the cloud, and you're able to then subscribe to that as a service. So it's really pay for what you use and nothing more. Now, that all said, you can run all kinds of flavors of Hadoop, Cloudera, Hortonworks, Mapper, etc. on the Azure platform. There are other ways to do it, but the platform as a service, as they call it, route is through Hortonworks and HD Insight. And then down at the bottom is Stream Analytics. So as I mentioned earlier, this pairs well with the Event Hub, where you've got streaming data coming in. So let's say it was those Twitter feeds we were talking about, and as we're monitoring what's happening on Twitter, and we're perhaps running through a quick algorithm to detect sentiment, and then quickly scoring that and saying is sentiment rising or falling or spiking, that's where Stream Analytics could come in, and you could apply that to build a solution like I just described. And then over on the far right is all of the consumer facing or consumption type of interfaces. So at the top you've got Power BI, which we're going to talk about in a second and do a whole demo on that. Cortana is Microsoft's personal digital assistant. So if you've got a Windows phone, or if you've got Windows 10 or even an Xbox, you've got the Cortana technology. So for example, with Windows 10, you can now surface Power BI and personalized BI through Cortana, so enabling your users to, for example, in our retail scenario, be able to say, hey, what's the performance, how many sales has our downtown Manhattan store done today. You're able to ask that through Cortana, and it's going to call out to the Power BI service, get that information, and surface a visualization right inside your Windows desktop in the search bar. So there's some great integration that's happening between these various technologies to, again, enable that consumption, enable that innovative experience to happen. Next down is perceptual intelligence. So this is, modern day artificial intelligence, if you will. You've got recognition of photos. Faces was one thing that Microsoft proved out in the spring of last year. They created a website called howold.net, and what that was doing was basically enabling users to upload a picture with one or more people in it, and product would essentially guess the age of the people to prove out that this technology that they have is viable and really does work. And so you can apply that in a number of different commercial settings. Obviously, things like that are used in security, but in retail, again, you could detect the age of the people in the photograph and make marketing recommendations based on what you're seeing there. The same thing with speech to text or text to speech, the ability to interact with the computer by speaking to it. We all do it. If you have an iPhone, you've no doubt tried Siri, or if you have a Windows phone, you've no doubt tried Cortana. Being able to talk into the machine and then have it respond back to you in an intelligent way. Obviously, that relies on a bed of data underneath the covers and some analytics to make it all a attractive experience. But it's all possible with these technologies. And we talked about the business scenarios there. There's some canned recommendation, churn, and forecasting capabilities. But all of that and more is essentially built with the Azure machine learning and a lot of these other capabilities. So you see the black box is made up of all these cloud services, providing you with an end-to-end experience. So just to give you an idea of what kind of experience you could build, this particular dashboard that I'm bringing up now is actually a custom dashboard. This was a case study that Microsoft did with a hospital called Dartmouth-Hitchcock. And the idea here is to show how modern healthcare and analytics could come together. And so what we're looking at is a patient dashboard, a custom one where you've got a whole bunch of information coming together from a number of different sources. And you've got both the traditional BI of what's happening and some attributes and statistics being represented, but you've also got some predictive capability being rendered. So for example, in this blood pressure widget, as I bring that up, you've got actual blood pressure that was read off of, say, a device that the patient is wearing, and then based on other factors, it's forecasting that his blood pressure is potentially going to rise. So in this sort of managed care environment, you've got the ability for a nurse or a doctor, somebody to call the patient and essentially advise them, differently or get ahead of an issue before it becomes a bigger problem. And, you see this in healthcare, both on the provider side as it is in this case. And we've talked to health insurance plans that are interested in becoming more proactive, because ultimately if you make less claims against your health insurance policies, they're going to be more profitable. So using devices such as the example here, being able to detect this is happening, and maybe it's not a managed care scenario. What if we've got something counting the number of steps that Ben Andrews here has taken in a day, and maybe studies have shown that if you take 10,000 steps or more in a day, you're likely to be more healthier. It's better for your heart, etc. Well, recording that information, we don't necessarily have to call his doctor and tell on him. We could call his granddaughter, right? And him getting a call from his granddaughter, who gets a notification on her mom's phone or something like that, saying, Grandpa's not walking his steps, that might be even a bigger catalyst for Grandpa to start becoming more active, because, we want to see him live to 100. And so it's these kinds of things. This is all part of that experience that we're talking about. It's not necessarily, digital in some cases. It's a mix of devices and formats and ultimately that call from the granddaughter. So that's another example. When we do these webinars, there's people from all industries that obviously attend, and when we're doing one-on-one client sessions, it's a lot easier to have a conversation, focused on a particular industry and the pain points of that industry. But we try to keep a broad or take a broader approach with the webinar. So if anybody's in the utilities industry or energy, we've applied analytics there. We worked with a water utility not too long ago, and the team that we were working for, their main charge from their bosses was generate more revenue for us. And if you think about, most of our utilities, electric, water, et cetera, their message is usually conservation, right? They want you to use less of their resources, not have a bigger bill, and so that there's more of it to go around. Well, how do you possibly generate more revenue for a utility? There's only so many homes with so many meters, et cetera. And what these guys did is first of all, there's the ability to now stream water meter. The meters became digital, they were able to collect the readings on an hourly basis. So you've got streaming digital meters. You've got to collect that data. So we talked about, some of the data acquisition and data management capabilities of Cortana. As that's coming in, then they're able to study the data, and one of the things they started looking at, was trends, as any analyst would, and they noticed that, certain business was using a little bit or well below the typical trend for A, themselves and historically, and then B, the peers in their industry, and so that obviously garnered a little bit of attention and warranted them to dig a little bit deeper. And as they did, they finally said, you know what, we need to dispatch a field agent to go out there and just take a look at this meter because there's obviously something not right here. So sure enough, they did. The field agent went out and took pictures, and it became pretty obvious once they did that the meters had been tampered with. So in this case, the customer was obviously trying to steal from the utility. The interesting thing about the story is that the customer was actually a laundromat. And so if you think about any business that obviously needs water to provide its services, laundromats are towards the top. And as they uncovered this one particular scenario, they started looking deeper and deeper across the industry, and turns out that there must be some underground laundromat newsletter that tells these people exactly how to tamper with meters and pay less in water bills, because they found it was fairly prevalent in that industry, and we're able to recover a fair amount of money. So there's a great example of data and analytics being used in a very unique way. You think, how are we possibly going to generate more revenue, or we can recover revenue as one approach, and then from the data through the analyst to then the field agents being dispatched, you have this very connected value chain that is all linked together, and the tools and the techniques and the technologies that enable that obviously have to work in unison. And so you're going from raw data through analyst tools all the way to the cell phone or mobile device on a guy with a hard hat in a truck driving around town, investigating the meters. So how is something like this put together with the Cortana Analytics Suite? So on the left-hand side, you've got those Azure Event Hubs that we talked about. So the streaming data from the meters is coming in there. Stream Analytics gives us the ability to look at that data while it's in flight. So if we could pick up any kind of near real-time statistics, notice any trends, and want to react to that, you certainly can. Then you finally want to rest the data somewhere, so further analysis can be done, right? So that's where the blob storage plays a good role. We can just rest it as it is. We don't have to transform it. We don't have to worry about building ETL streams, et cetera. And that blob storage will be part of that data lake that we talked about earlier, because in this case it's very fluid, it's very dynamic, and we don't necessarily need to build relational databases to store it until we need to do something with it. From there, the analysts can use another service inside of Azure called machine learning. There's a web-based studio where they do their modeling, where they're able to source the data, build their data sets, clean it, move it around, and ultimately write those R scripts or those Python scripts. So open source, analytics languages like that applied to the data to then ultimately render those predictions or descriptions of the data, the sort of refined analysis. And once they've tested and trained those models and they like what they're producing, we can leverage that in other applications. So the other side of Azure machine learning is the API service. That's in the next column. And then literally in minutes, 5 minutes or less, you click your way to being able to expose your model as a web service, which then can be leveraged inside of custom web applications, as well as some of these BI tools like Power BI. You can build native tablet or phone applications as well. And so you've got an end-to-end capability with the Cortana Analytics Suite. And here is an example of a Power BI dashboard that was put together for utility in California. You can see all the different kinds of visualizations. The one thing that you really can't see from the still picture is that Power BI supports streaming visualization. So if the data is streaming in, we can capture it with the service and we can actually display it. So if there was a KPI on here, it would update, the chart would update, everything would be moving around. So you've got a pretty unique capability within Power BI to develop these engaging dashboards that aren't just a traditional static dashboard. It's always delayed a few minutes. You've actually got the ability to stream data right into into the service and render it on your dashboards and on your reports. In terms of how to put all this together, so this will be in the slide deck. You guys can download this after the webinar, but just to go through it real quick, much like the building blocks, we started with a source of value. What problem are we trying to solve? Then you look at the data ecosystem. A lot of us always look internally, hey, we've got that data warehouse, we've got these various systems, but a couple other areas to consider as part of that ecosystem are external data. So depending on your industry, there's very likely a clearinghouse of information that would give you perspective on how not just you're performing, but your competitors are performing, so how the industry is doing as a whole. And then beyond that, obviously any cloud services you're subscribed to, your Salesforce implementations, et cetera, but also the exhaust that's generated as users interact with these services, right? So a potential shopper interacting with your e-commerce site and all of the clicks and the path that they take through there. Any user, using any software that's, and then the telemetry within that software is that exhaust that's being generated. That in and of itself can be valuable to building these experiences and making them more personalized and more effective. In step 3, you start to build the model now that you've got your data figured out. And the first step is usually the data science guys, the data pros, working through the algorithms and the data and coming up with something innovative to show. And usually the result of that is, to most of us, a black box. And it takes some time for us to build trust that, yes, this black box is producing accurate results. Well, one of the things that a consulting company named McKinsey & Company recommends is actually applying some subject matter expertise to the black box. So pair your data pros, your data science guys with the business experts that have been in the industry for 30 years. They'll be able to know something that's just not right, despite what the data says. If it's a scenario that's never going to happen, you can stop the data science guys from wasting time on it. And once you combine that street smarts, if you will, with the book smarts, you've got what they've dubbed the smart box. So we've gone from a black box to a smart box, and that's the preferred route to take forward. And then once you get that all done, then in step 4, it's a lot of what we talked about before. Do you redesign a process, a human process, and make that better by enabling those people to make decisions that they otherwise probably wouldn't have been able to, or would have had it in a whole lot of manual analysis to produce, or do you automate decisions? The higher volume, lower dollar decisions. Do you basically allow the machines to make those decisions and be able to process more transactions that way? And then lastly, like any software database development, this is going to be iterative. It's going to be about trying something and learning from it and reiterating back to the beginning and adding more to it or refining it a little bit until you're happy, with the results and you've got the next thing to move on to. So again, to take away from the analytics side of things, and Cortana in particular, you've got an end-to-end platform. We've got the ability, or have always had the ability, to do kind of the traditional BI, the static reports about what happened. We then built dashboards and investigated, in an interactive way, why did something happen. Then predictive analytics enabled us to suggest what will happen in certain scenarios, but now we're talking about recommendations that ultimately support one of those two paths, either the automation of decisions or better decision support for humans to take action. So where can you look for opportunities? There's 4 big ones that we can think of on here, depending on your industry. Again, customer activity is always a good one. That's, that walking a mile in their shoes. Inevitably, you can become an innovator leveraging all this wonderful technology that's out there today. When you become that innovator to stand out from your peers, your competitors, like Elon being, providing a digital mortgage in an industry that's traditionally done it just one way, all heavily on paper, with a lot of people and a lot of manpower required. The supply chain is another side. It's obviously the other end of your organization. Inevitably, there's going to be multiple systems there that you're using, maybe even Excel spreadsheets that are managing some of that process, outside sources, and a lot of potential improvement or optimization that can happen with the use of analytics. Number 3, anytime you have a large number of people in one place, like the field agents in the water company scenario. Call center agents is another big one. You know, their time can always be more optimized, and these techniques, these tools can obviously be used, and you know, gaining a few minutes across 1,000 or 10,000 people adds up really, really fast and can pay for these solutions really, really quick and give you a good ROI. And then lastly, you know, obviously all of our organizations have a large amount of text and unstructured data. We've got emails, Excel documents, Word documents. We've run into scenarios where all of that was just left for dead, or thought, you know, that there's really no value to be able to extract out of those. And with these techniques, these technologies, text analytics, other analytics approaches, we really can get into that data. And what happens a lot is you know, we'll build a system, and by we I mean the world, we in the industry, and then you know, the system's built and the user adoption is really, really low because people, you know, used to use Excel to do this, and they prefer Excel. Well, instead of trying to, you know, change their habits and force them onto a system they may not essentially necessarily want to use, we could take it a step at a time. We could leverage Excel the way it is and just, you know, mine the data from Excel that they're using, and then show them a better tool, and then over time they'll see the better tool and gravitate towards that, but we don't have to rip the Excel out of their hands where they'll revolt and not want to, you know, take advantage of the investments that we've made. So there's a huge amount of opportunity there. If that applies to you, definitely reach out to us. We can brainstorm some possibilities. So that wraps up our first piece, the analytics section. We're going to move into Power BI now, which I'm just going to start and kind of focus most of this on a demo of Power BI. So for those that haven't ventured out and signed up for Power BI, it is a freemium type of service from Microsoft. So that means that you can start using it for free, and really there's a good chunk of capability that is available with no cost whatsoever. Just to kind of give a high-level overview on the left-hand side here, this enumerates really, really well how the service is set up. So at the top level, you've got dashboards, and that's what we're looking at here. Under the dashboards, as we were to click through some of these widgets, and we'll do that in a second, you drill into reports where you have the ability to further ask more questions of the type of data that you're analyzing on the dashboard. And then underneath those reports are the various data sets that are available to visualize in both the reports and dashboards. So just focus on the dashboard for a second. One of the innovations, I mean, you've got the various widgets. You can see a number of different interactive visualizations here. The first one on the left is just kind of a KPI going from an actual to a target value, dollars spent versus dollars allocated. And I've got, you know, 19 million spent and 26 million that were allocated, so a little bit more than 3/4 of the way there. And just to give a high-level overview of what we're looking at here, so this is for a media company, a nonprofit called the Ad Council, a proof of concept that we did recently. And their business is, if you've ever seen the More You Know commercials or public service announcements on NBC, Smokey the Bear, the crash test dummies from the 80s. And early 90s, this organization basically pools the resources of advertisers and networks and various media outlets, as well as donors, organizations, and government agencies, and does that so they can, you know, basically disseminate these various public service announcements and the messages that they have. So across all these different quote-unquote campaigns, our dollars are allocated, and then you know, they're spent, you know, by deploying the media in various channels. So up here we got that target, ads placed, views right below it. Down below that we've got the breakdown of those numbers by media type. So we're kind of old school in this demo. It's just broadcast radio, newspaper, and broadcast TV. Obviously there's a lot of digital formats out there now. Down here below on the below that on the left-hand side is a scatter plot, and I'll explain what this scatter plot is doing a little bit left. And then going back up, the right-hand column here are you know, 3 line charts that basically show the various metrics. So our ads placed, our dollars spent, and our views, all in a year-to-date way across the different media types. So one of the innovations the Power BI offers you is the ability to search for answers. If you think about how people typically use BI tools, they're looking for an answer to a question. So if I wanted to see, have it show me dollars spent, then I'll type that in and it quickly aggregates the 89 million that we have in this data set. If I wanted to see that for 2013, then I could just add that to the question, and there we go, 18.9. In 2014, I can change that, and there's a $19 million number there. And if that's a number that I want to track and keep an eye on, then there's this little pin icon right next to that search bar that I can click and pin this visual. So we'll click this, and I'm going to get a little dialog here that says, hey, where do you want to pin this to? And so, of course, I want to pin this to my existing dashboard, although, as you can see, I could create a new dashboard and start one from scratch. So hit pin. Got a little notice up here that this has been pinned, and I can quickly return back to my dashboard. And now you see over here in the upper right, we've got this dollars spent measure that essentially we just created by typing it in, and now it's on my dashboard so I can track it. One other thing, typically you do on a dashboard is you'd want to be able to drill in and see what's going on behind the data. So over here on the left with this gauge chart, I want to drill into these dollars spent versus dollars allocated and see what's happening here. So this is wired up to take me to the campaign dashboard where I've got those same numbers, and you can see that those numbers are for 2014. So instead of typing here, I've got a filter, a visual filter here called a slicer, and I can quickly change that and the numbers change accordingly. And what this is doing is showing us in the grid below the rank of the campaigns by the dollars spent. So from 1 and on down, and you can quickly see that in 2014, the number one campaign that was funded was a job training and employment campaign. So here in the report is where we are now. Kind of click through from the dashboard. If you look at the bottom of the report, you can see that there's various tabs down here. And the tabs, just like if you're familiar with Excel, you'd have tabs in Excel. These tabs enable you to have actually a handful of reports or pages in a report. So I've got the ability to share different kinds of information within this report. This next page here is designed to filter down on teen-targeted campaigns. So I've got some quick statistics about those campaigns. And then as I interact with the chart at the bottom, it will filter down all the rest of the visuals on the page, and I can quickly see if I wanted to drill into hunger prevention, the metrics associated with that. If I keep going to the next tab here, this is my year-to-date, so you can probably recognize the charts on the left hand or the right hand side here. Those are those line charts that we had pinned to our dashboard. They essentially came off of this page in the report. So had I clicked into one of those, this is where I would have ended up to do some further investigation. And then on the left-hand side of this report, you just have various tables of breakdowns all the way down to the campaign level and breaking each campaign down by the media type and all the metrics associated with each of those media types. And so you've got the ability to kind of get as granular as you want. Speaking of granularity, this next one here is the least sexiest of all the pages in here, but it serves a very valuable purpose. This is created to show the detailed transaction level information. So as I filter down to specific campaigns and media types, then want to see the different placements that were done, across every single outlet that's out there. This is essentially the transactional level data in this data set. So oftentimes that comes up, being able to drill all the way from a high-level KPI all the way down through, the different levels to the raw data and see, what the cause of the problem is. That's, common workflow or user flow in a dashboard, and that's, as you can tell here, supported, and you're able to design and configure these reports to do that. The next one here is that scatter plot that we mentioned that I told you I'd come back to. One of the things that this visualization, which is very powerful, was able to show us. So we wanted a way to show how a dollar spent on a particular campaign this year compares to the dollars spent on that campaign in a year ago quarter. So what's happening this quarter versus this quarter a year ago. And the reason the scatter plot is a good visualization for this is if we map the dollars spent on the x-axis down the left-hand side and the dollars spent in a year-ago quarter across the right-hand, or sorry, the bottom axis, the y-axis, then if you can imagine a 45-degree line going from the lower left of the chart to the upper right, then everything above that imaginary line is going to be where the dollars spent grew year over year. So as you can see here, as I click on this, one of these upper dots, Autism Awareness Campaign, we went from 58,900 last year to 363 this year. And then down below, in one of the lower dots, which are going to be the worst performers, we went from 230,000 last year to only 15,000 this year. So you can see very quickly, the outliers, if you will, and the ones, maybe to kind of focus on around the edges and then kind of move towards the middle. So, this is designed to be reports that are put together and interacted with this way. The other thing that you can do, a common sort of scenario that people use these data visualizations tools for these days is to do data storytelling, right? So I want to be able to go to a meeting and I want to have a good presentation for the executives, and essentially, I want to be able to tell that story. So in addition to what's on here, I could, with the rights that I've been granted, I could edit this report, and when that happens, I'm still in my web browser, I'm jumping into edit mode, and now I'm able to, if I wanted to support additional information on here, I could very easily create another visual. So I'll just drag this out a little bit so I can see. So, dragging my campaign out and maybe my ranks, I can quickly see those pop up here. I'm starting to create a new visual. I could change that to a different type of visual very quickly and easily with one click. And then, other things that we could do is sometimes I just want to write a message to the team or the executive saying, our, year-over-year performance is phenomenal. And if it doesn't like my spelling, it'll even help me correct it. And so, we're able to put this, notes, shapes, graphics, et cetera, into it, and you're essentially, designing this experience right in the web. So this is going to work across the devices without me being a programmer, without me having to know HTML and CSS and any of that stuff. So I'm creating this, and I could very easily save this. And now I've got a story, and you could have a story that takes place over many tabs and linking from one tab to another kind of unfolds, and people could pull this open, wherever they are. It doesn't have to be the presentation you're giving, and just read through it and see that story that you're telling with the data. So a very, very powerful way to do that with, so you can see it doesn't take a lot of training to be able to just drag stuff onto the screen and work with it. But if you do have the time to become, to spend more time with it, you can see here that the visualizations, there's a fair amount of them. The one thing that's unique to this platform is the ability to add your own visualizations, so we could totally create ones if none of these work. You see, typical, if you've ever built a pivot table in Excel, you're familiar with the field list, dragging fields and elements over, establishing filters, but even beyond that, you get into this formatting. So for any one of these widgets, you can see that there's a tremendous amount of attributes that you can change about how things appear on the axes, what data, what colors are used for what data elements, how the legend appears, the titles, the backgrounds, et cetera, et cetera. You've got, just some very, very fine control over what's happening and what shows up on the screen, which I think is very powerful. So just kicking back out to the dashboard, I'm not going to save any of this that I did here. And I did that just to kind of take us back to, we were talking about dashboards. We clicked through the dashboards. We went into a report and a number of tabs on a report. And then, the question will be, well, where does the data come from and how do I start building this? So down here at the bottom is a button called Get Data, and you really have a number of options to start visualizing your data. One of the easiest things is, hey, if you've got data in Excel, just upload it to the service, and now you've got a whole host of visualizations that you're able to take advantage of that weren't, they're far more advanced than what's in Excel. You could also connect to live databases, whether they're inside of your organization or in the cloud. There's connectors available to do that. And then speaking of connectors, there's a whole host of services, cloud services, that are common to all of our organizations, whether it's Salesforce or a CRM, another CRM package, Marketo for marketing, and Adobe Analytics for marketers, IT solutions, project management solutions, ERPs, accounting solutions, and this is just a list of connectors that's been developed to date. This product's only been out for less than 6 months, and there's new ones being built out and released every week. So you're able to quickly, as a business user, connect to one of these services with your username and password and start visualizing the data there. And then the final option is more for the analyst or the data pro to enable the end users to access data, and that's through something called Power BI Desktop. So clicking out of the web and into Power BI Desktop, if you've ever built anything in Tableau or ClickView or any of these modern quote-unquote self-service data visualization tools, you no doubt have used a similar tool to Power BI Desktop. They all have it. It's the tool where you do basically one of three things. You source your data, then you model it and add the calculations that you want to have within that data, and then finally you build out your visualization. So as you can see here, if we look at the tabs across the bottom here, this is in the Power BI Desktop tool, the same stuff that we were looking at in the web browser. So essentially, to build these visualizations, to build these reports, we use Power BI Desktop. We connect it to our data source. If I click over to this data tab, you see the various sets of raw data that we used to put this together. They were sourced in. We had we applied a few calculations to it, and then we start building these visualizations. Once you're done with that, you save your file locally. Heck, you could share the file locally and do nothing more. But ultimately, the true value comes from uploading it to the cloud service and being able to share it and collaborate on it with others. So just to kind of summarize what we went through here in Power BI, obviously if you've got data in Excel, which a lot of organizations still do, this is a natural sort of evolution to visualize that data. That's not the only thing, obviously, and the only source you can do. You can do all the other sources we mentioned as well. Once you've got that data up there, it's in a single pane of glass. You've got the tracking, the real-time capabilities, the interactive drill-throughs, the ability to pin new visualizations and build your own dashboards very easily, as well as that search capability to pull up quick answers to questions and even pin those as well. There's native apps across the device spectrum, Apple, iPhone, iPad, Windows devices, etc., available to surface any of these dashboards you build without any additional work. Those content packs that we talked about connecting to all these various services, like I mentioned, there's a bunch that are out today. There's plenty more coming in the future. And then the Power BI Desktop, which is available to download for free off of the PowerBI.com website. And a lot of times when I say that, it's free, people look at me and then say, what do you mean by free? And it truly is. It's not a trial. Everything we did here, you could essentially build with the free Power BI Desktop and the free subscription to the PowerBI.com service. It's only if you need the advanced capabilities that you would have to, subscribe, and even that is very affordable. And then the connections to your data, obviously data refresh is important to keep all of these dashboards live and updated. And then just as in case your organization is using Office 365, Power BI is just one more service in that whole suite. And so it's probably the most cost-effective way to license it is if you've got an Office 365 subscription. It's actually very, very, very cheap to do it that way. And so if you want to get started, it's powerbi.com. And as we stare at the address here, or give you a chance to write it down, I'm going to transition over to my co-presenter, Bill, who is going to talk about the enhancements coming in SQL Server 2016, which is due out later this year.
Thanks, Adam. That was a great overview of Power BI. And welcome, everybody. What I want to go through here really quickly are a bunch of slides here around SQL Server 2016 and really how it helps to build upon and enhance all of the BI tools that you have really gone through so far with Adam. So it's really focused around a number of areas. So enhanced analysis, a rich set of tools, as you saw earlier, more modern reports for those of you know SSRS and know it was a little bit aged. They've definitely done some modernization. We'll show a little bit later. Mobile reports, sort of bringing us into, I guess, more like the 2000s here, but the ability to look at reports or see your data and visualize it on any mobile platforms. Hybrid BI, Adam spoke a little bit about that, being able to sort of combine the cloud and your on-prem stuff. And then some more support for SharePoint 2016. I'll go through here. All right, so the vision for Microsoft BI reporting, right, is to have different layers of access into the data. So interactive reports with Power BI and Power BI Desktop, as Adam showed you earlier. Report Builder, this is your good old SSRS with paginated reports and a little more detail level drill down ability. And again, they've done some serious upgrades in 2016 with that. Of course, spreadsheets and Excel, so Office 2016 and SQL 2016 all kind of go together to add and enhance the ability to look at stuff through Excel. And mobile reports, they've incorporated Data Zen so that you can publish mobile KPIs and reports. And if anyone's used Data Zen, it's very similar to the existing experience there, but just combined in with SSRS. All right, so 3 areas, right? So creating, as we talked about, Excel, interactive reports with Power BI Desktop. There's the Data Zen Publisher we'll look at a little bit later. SQL Server Report Builder, Report Designer. As you see, there's all these various entrees or ways to visualize and create reporting. And many of these can be done by just your standard user, doesn't require necessarily a business intelligence person to be able to put these together, but it can be all combined, with the work from different various groups pulled together and available for everybody to see. The ability to manage, so as we talked, the hybrid, you can use Power BI Desktop and publish things to the cloud. You can use Power BI Desktop and together with SQL Server reporting services and keep it all on-prem. Excel is something you can use in the cloud and on-prem. On the mobile reports, you can publish to the cloud. The ability to even publish paginated reports to the cloud is a new thing in 2016. And again, combining all these things together. And then, of course, consuming, right? So the web portal, the Power BI web portal, out there in the cloud, you can give access to the right people to see the right sets of data and aggregate up and show folks what they need to see. Various mobile apps that will now have the ability to access all these reports, the same reports that you get to from your desktop, you'll be able to see in your apps, in the mobile apps. The report server web portal, again, this is your good old SSRS, but with a much more modernized look. And SharePoint Web, there's existing support for that, but they will continue to support and enhance the ability to embed those things into SharePoint. Power BI Desktop, I won't really go through this too much because Adam spoke to it, but really the one thing I would mention is this is your ETL tool for a business user. So you don't necessarily need to have that, whole big set of code that's out there that's, complex and hidden somewhere that developers needed in order to figure out how to get to this data. You as a business person can now do your own levels of ETL, pull them in through Power BI Desktop, and do the analysis that you need. Reporting services, as I spoke earlier, this is an area where SQL 2016 definitely has a lot of enhancements. Of course, the paginated reports as they were in the past, but a much more modern look to it and much more feature-rich as far as being able to format the details and be able to display. Mobile reports, you can see my little screenshot. There's some you have the ability to create KPIs that can show on mobile reports. You can take various visuals and also display them in mobile format. The new web portal, again, you can sort of see from the picture, it's a much more modern look. This is just more. It's also built on HTML5 technology, so you're not so much stuck to Internet Explorer anymore, right? So anything that which is pretty much any of the browsers out there these days, are able to support HTML5. There's newer visuals like tree maps, sunbursts, different charts and gauges. So again, any of you using SSRS, you'll see there's quite a bit of enhancements there. You can actually develop reports in Visual Studio 2015, which is a new thing. And there's plugin free printing. You're able to customize the parameters. So you used to have to order the parameters exactly right, and they would just show a certain way. Now you have the ability to customize it within the report builder. This is a good one, being able to export to PowerPoint. Something that I know I've always wanted to be able to do. You can take any of the charts from an SSRS report and directly export them either manually, or you can actually schedule it into a PowerPoint slide deck. You can pin. So Adam showed you the Power BI web dashboards, and you'd be able to create visuals there, but now you can actually also, with 2016, you'll be able to take a chart or a visual out of an SSRS report and pin it directly to a dashboard. Then when you actually look at the visual in the dashboard, you can drill through to the underlying SSRS report. Again, mobile reports. So there's a little utility for being able to drag and drop and sort of switch around your dashboards a little bit more right from a mobile app. Skip over here a little bit. Okay, another area where there's a significant enhancements is analysis services. There's a whole ton of things that I won't be able to get to here today, but really the big ones I'll cover. Being able to use SQL Server analysis servers as a semantic model. So anybody that's used SSAS in the past, you typically are going through a whole rigmarole to create a set of cubes. And again, you need your BI team to be able to develop those cubes. Now what they've done is allowed you to be able to create just a semantic model that it basically defines how the data looks to a business user, and how that then connects to the back end, but it does not go through a process of pulling all the data into a cube. So this way, it works very closely with Power BI Desktop and Power BI, so that you can present, as Adam was showing, a more business-friendly view to all of your data, and the ability to drag and drop and combine within Power BI without it needing to actually create all these cubes ahead of time. And as you see here, there's high performance direct query. So yes, it's going to be better than going directly to the database and running some SQL. Maybe it's not going to be cube level, but the performance is there to be able to do direct query and live querying so that you can have always up-to-date and refreshable models. So this is just describing the semantic models again. There's support for MDX. So in Excel, in Excel and in Power BI, you also have some tools that allow you to, custom build a set of queries that are maybe a little bit more complex than a business user might build, but allow the business user again to just take those queries or those calculations that you've put into place and use them. This is just more in the tabular models. Within the tabular models, there's now a many-to-many bidirectional cross-filtering. There's a bunch of new DAX functions. You can again view in the preferred language DAX or MDX. Some organization stuff. Tabular scripting language. So older, I'm not exactly fully versed on this, but the actual tabular model is now basically scripted in JSON, a JSON-ish look. So that way all of your metadata changes, they only change a single object, everything's localized, so your code merges work, and this is just more of a techie type of thing, but it allows you to basically do better source control of your models. you can actually access now with 2016. You can develop your tabular models using code. Yep, there's some more connectivity here, so you can actually use Netezza as a data source. Different performance enhancements. These are just some of the new tools. All right, so enhancements for SharePoint BI. So there are new edit modes so that you can actually edit Power Pivot right directly within Excel Online or SharePoint Online. There's a support for Excel 2016 workbooks, the ability to schedule data refreshes for Power Query. And then the reporting services improvements is the new chart types that I mentioned, the plugin free printing and export, and an updated report builder. All right, so that was the high level of the enhancements to SQL 2016. And you can definitely go to Microsoft.com and do a search for 2016 if you'd like to see more.